So those people who didn't say hi, you're not on. Right, we're studying work today. Work properly. This is Anthropology and Human Nature, and lecture today is on domestic labour, anthropology at home, housework, reproduction. It's lecture number 12, and it's the 8th of December. All right, so anthropology and everyday domesticity, but the household, I suppose. The domestic grind, okay, doing the dishes. So contemporary life, basically. What do? We're at home, especially more so in after the pandemic. And there's a certain sensibility to being at home that we need to attend to, I guess. Looking after your household, looking after your family, issues of care, but also just living together and how irritating that can be, constant criticism of siblings, the fighting of the kids. They're quiet right now, but let's see. Or, you know, the drill of everyday life, the routine and so on. These are pretty mundane topics, but everybody has some experience of them. We probably take them for granted, and we maybe, since it's an academic study, we need a way to make us rethink things, see everything as new, so that we can see it properly in a way. You have to make things a bit strange before you can see them new. Somehow that seems to make sense. I mean, do you have to go somewhere else to see your own place differently, to think about somewhere? Do you need that perspective on it to really understand what you're about or they're about or whatever? And how far would that be? How different do you have to see things in order to be able to think, oh, so that's how it is, to rethink it. I think we do need to have some kind of jolt, some device, some irritant to shock us out of complacency in order to really think. You know, we get into routines, and the longer you stay somewhere, the more normal it seems, and kind of the more you block out. It might be really important or seem really unusual to someone else who take as routine. And so on. So I think, first of all, anthropology is quite good at thinking about that, how traveling somewhere lets you see, maybe, things are a little differently. Shines a different kind of light on things. And yet, anthropologists studying their homes was a pretty rare thing early on. I mean, I said right at the very start that the anthropologists going elsewhere to study were kind of really reflecting on their own difference, and doing comparative work. Remember, we talked about Evans Pritchard and that, but in a way, not consciously. And so anthropologists and even sociologists really looking at where they themselves lived was a little unusual until about the 60s, when anthropology at home started to become a topic, 70s maybe, because of feminist anthropologists largely who looked at the domestic sphere. Why was that? There might be lots of reasons. You can think, well, feminists recognize the importance of the domestic sphere, even though what they said kind of was like a lead balloon in terms of anthropology. Didn't grab the attention or interest of the big fat razorback anthropologists. The what do they call it? Silverback, the head honchos. Who didn't think, oh, that's women's stuff or unimportant, or were more interested in strange and exotic societies, right? So someone studying domestic world was both too familiar and too strange. How is that anthropology, they might have asked, or anyway, some really important theoretical developments were not really taken up, not really heard properly. And that's a shame, because the relevance of anthropology to public life was at stake. You know, was anthropology only about people far away in societies that kind of were at the periphery of where contemporary life was for the majority of the people that read anthropology? Yeah, I don't know. And the question, I guess, is here and there hierarchy or division, with anthropology putting more emphasis on there, was quite problematic. And there were many other binary divides that anthropologists worked with that they hadn't really examined as critically as you'd think that they might, given some of the other theoretical interests they had. Like the debate between history and the contemporary, and the urgency of that, never really got going around the topic of commodification. I mean, what was really historically significant was more and more of human life became commodified, became, you know, about purchasing objects in a marketplace. And it took a long time for that kind of culture industry argument to enter into anthropology. And the intellectual relevance of the discipline suffered for that reason. It was about something quite obscure. And, you know, and the possibility of anthropologists becoming public intellectuals was at stake. Whether anthropologists should be public intellectuals or can be again is up for grabs, of course, because any kind of intellectual now is somehow not in favour, given the way the media works. But there was a time where anthropologists did have a bit more of a say. Margaret Mead or Levi Strauss or so on. Less so, perhaps, after then. Now, anthropology at home fits into this, something like what I want to call the current conjuncture. You know what this word conjuncture means? So conjuncture is sort of a way of describing, say, what's going on now, or what's going on at a particular moment, where there are several different influences or forces at play, and they conjoin together. Now, anthropology at home, I think, is a part of the moment of significance of the 60s and 70s in anthropology. That's kind of a hinge for what I've been trying to do in this course, really. At the end of the period of empire, I suppose, after World War II and the independence movements and so on, coming to culmination with a wave of independence struggles and declarations of independence in the 60s, it became more difficult for anthropologists to go and do anthropology. At that same time, so this is conjuncture, there was the turning of anthropologists towards what they do as writers, right? Their reflective consideration of their own work. So, and that was the American anthropologists like Clifford and Marcus and so on. And they went on from the 60s, 70s into 80s, starting with Geertz and the question of the informant in the late 60s and 70s. But at the same time, there had been this growing social movements, this politicization of everyday life. The personal is political, slogans like that from feminists. And so the issue of anthropology at home was a way of referring to what feminists were doing with anthropology, Marxist feminists, socialist feminists, others, in focusing on issues that they were concerned with themselves. Right? Now, this was at the same time as some other big factors that I think play on this. The commodification, I've already mentioned, goes kind of hand in hand with the beginning of globalization, the reformatting of the world economy into one economy. neoliberalism, basically, and that leads to the, I suppose, the collapse of a two-block system, the end of the Soviet Union, and so on. And I think the generalized process of what we call proletarianization, the capture of knowledge by corporations and turning of everyone else into workers, skilled workers or semi-skilled workers within a system that worked in the interests of profit of the mega corporations. Right? And the beginnings of digitalization, I guess, are there as well. The computer revolution, it went from big computers to personal computing and ended up teaching us all to sit in front of a screen and type. That's how you become a worker now. And rethinking that kind of process. So feminists, but not only feminists, were people who thought about the issue of work and who works and what works and what kind of worker, and in fact, who's involved in producing knowledge about who works. So there was all sorts of experiments in knowledge creation. And I read recently a very interesting history about the so-called teach-in, or experiments in collective learning, right? And that's a part of it as well. Who has responsibility for learning? Is it the patriarchal teacher standing up in front of the class giving a lecture, or is there some kind of group learning? People learn from each other in the class or in the university and school. I'm in class, darling, sorry. I know I'm talking about participation, but you can't participate. You've got your own. Okay. Sorry about that. She came to tell me she's making up a story in her room. Anyway, that's part of the domestic life, right? If you're a sole carer for the kids, you get interrupted by the kids and have to do a little bit of management of that situation too. So what the feminist theorists brought to us was really important, and unfortunately it took a while to get into the heads of anthropologists, is some thinking, a series of concepts or attention to some issues that were there in the work of Marx, right? But maybe not so much in the subsequent readers of Marx or Marxists, or in the those who led party formations or Marxist teaching after Marx. Marx has big sections on the question of women and reproduction of labour. I want to stress this because this is the topic of a talk that's coming up at the conference we're having at TDT on the 17th and 18th of December. I'll talk to you about that a bit more later. But in that conference, when my friend Sally is going to talk about exactly Camille Barbagello's work, but Marx and the question of women. And some Marxists after, Raya Daniskevaya and Rosa Luxemburg, of course, do talk about this, but not as many. And it took a number of Marxist feminists writing in the 70s and 80s to really bring a different perspective on anthropology and anthropology at home, well, sociology as well, by introducing this, what they call a grammar of reproduction, focusing on some key areas of Marx's analysis that had maybe been neglected, right? And it's mainly about the reproduction of the labor force. And this question of that makes you rethink what is the domestic, what is happening in the domestic space. It's the reproduction, the process of creating labor capacity, people who can work, and the work that goes into creating people that can work. So I don't know, think about you as a potential worker, or maybe you have a job to fund your way through university, either part-time or even full-time, or you work in some way, or just you're in training to become a future worker. if you think about how you got to this position, or how I got to there, you've got to think of a huge number of different steps that had to be taken to make you a potential worker of interest to an employer, right? Having some skill or some capability that you have to have in place before you'll get your first salary. And what are those things? You think about them, and this will be the grammar. So you can break it down. You've got to be able to do the work that they want you to do. So you need to listen to their instruction, first of all, which means you need to know language. Somebody had to teach you language, and that was done primarily in the domestic space. You learnt it in your family from your parents. And maybe, yeah, it was developed by school and then university and so on. So it's not just the parents that did the work here, but learning to talk, right? Learning to talk and learning to read, although that's more often school nowadays, but you know, kids learn a lot of learning to read at home, are the first, or at least not the first, but pretty obvious parts of what makes you a potential worker. And someone had to teach you that. But you have to be able to actually turn up to work. You have to know, have the self-discipline to roll up to the place of work, to be able to, travel to work, to walk into the office or the factory, wherever. So you need to be able to walk. Somebody taught you to walk. Okay, your mum, your dad. But they didn't do that, as a, right? They didn't do it as this person will need this as a job skill. It's like all humans need to walk, right? That's a part of becoming human. But somebody has to stand you up and be ready to catch you when you take those first, we call them toddlers, right? In that when they first start to walk, they toddle because you're pretty wobbly on your feet. But somebody had to be there to catch you. And that was not paid work, the person that was doing that training, but it was part of your training to be a worker. You had to learn to dress yourself. Well, first of all, you were dressed for a long time by someone else. Somebody changed your diaper and your clothes, and when you peed on yourself and you pooped yourself, somebody cleaned you up and put new clothes on you, and eventually by about 3, I suppose, taught you to put on a shirt, not inside out, not the right one. Somebody taught you how to get dressed, right? Which now somebody had to teach you later to put on a tie or whatever you need for the workplace, right? Not all workplaces need a tie, but not all academics need to wear a tie. But that's also a continuity with the initial training of how to dress yourself that makes you a potential worker, or just a potential human being. But in our society, it means potential worker as well. You thinking about those clothes and someone changing your diaper, you had to learn to be toilet. You had to be toilet trained. I don't know if you've got pets, but you've had to train your pets to go in the right place. You know, I don't know. You wanted a pet cat or dog. You wanted a pet puppy, and you said to your parents, "Can we get a puppy? Can you get a puppy?" And they probably said, "Only if you train it to poop in the sidewalk or whatever." Right. So the labor of having to do that toilet training was done by your parents, actually, and historically, mostly that's done by mothers. That changing of diapers and training in habits of cleanliness, not just pooping, also washing, brushing your teeth, washing your hair and your clothes and so on. Somebody helped you learn to do that over many years. And that's a kind of work that makes it possible for you now to be a worker and you to be later to be a parent and train someone else in this crazy system. But your manners, your language, your skills as a human being, your interpersonal relation skills. Right? You learn them in the family, and you largely learn them. It's largely the work of women who've historically done that. Right? It's women who do this labour in most societies, even now, with some Western societies claim some kind of rhetoric, and you will find occasionally men who are the sole, the person who does most of the childcare. You'll find that 1 or 2 in every 10 or something, but by far the majority is still women who do that labour of training the next workforce. And of course, they also do the labour of birthing that workforce. In English, and I don't know if it's in Tiếng Việt, somebody could help me out here. In English, the actual process of giving birth, right, after a woman, as if like the first 9 months wasn't labour enough, 9 months of being pregnant, and then when the baby starts coming, the waters break, and the baby is going to come. In English, we call that going into labour. Right? In Tiếng Việt, I don't know, what do you call it in Tiếng Việt? So, do you use the metaphor of labour? Because it's going into labour, and then when the baby's born, that's the labour of childbirth is done. But in fact, everyone knows that it's not easy in the first 9 months anyway. Certainly the last few months must be very frustrating. You've got this alien thing in your body. It's pushed up all your organs to the side and squashed everything. Your liver and your kidneys are all squashed up to the bones, and it's been sucking all of the life force out of you just to grow and grow and grow and grow. And then it wants to get out, and it's going to come out in a quite painful I assume, I'm told, and as I've seen a couple of times now, it looks like a pretty painful process. And certainly after the labour, there's several months where it's also pretty hard work, breastfeeding, giving food, and waking up every 2 hours for a baby, even though the male in the relationship will take on some of that work. The majority of it still is women. So women have done most of the work of reproduction and do it until you're a teenager, I suppose, with school and with community, and I don't know, maybe church or temple. They have a bit of a, or village or whatever. It takes a village to raise a, there are other people who contribute to training, but the majority of that work is still universally in our contemporary world done by women. And the grammar of reproduction, the feminist theorists, the ones who said, well, this was mentioned in Marx and so on, but maybe he didn't develop it. He said he would, but it was in a book on wages that ended up not happening. But there's quite a lot in Das Kapital about this. But Marxists subsequently seem to have neglected this. And so by insisting on this grammar of reproduction, in this scenario that frankly is hard work, okay, these theorists came up with some important things for scholars to pay attention to. The theorist I mean are Maria della Costa, who has I read first her fantastic exchange of letters with Louis Althusser, the French Communist Party theorist. But more importantly, I think, and a greater book, is Leopoldina Fortunati, an Italian theorist. Her Arcane of Reproduction, pictured here: housework, prostitution, labour and capital, where she makes the argument that the Marxist text needs to take into account the labour of women, whether in the home where they do housework or in sex work, which they also do as a contribution to of labour to the production of capital. Right? Sex work keeps male workers happy, I suppose, as does, and being a wife keeps male workers happy. It does a kind of labor of keeping the worker working, right? The reproduction of the labor force. Some Marxist feminists, like Silvia Federici, Maria della Costa, and some others, started in the 70s a campaign called Wages for Housework, and there were others. A campaign around 24-hour childcare to put you, not necessarily to get women wages for housework, but to provoke people to see differently, to see that actually this area is neglected in Marxism. The chapter on wages is truncated, and really women have been doing this massive amount of work that help produce workers for capitalism. It's a contribution to the costs of capital, basically, the overhead costs, the training costs that capital doesn't pay for, that it relies on. And Marx had already said the worker is forced to take responsibility for arriving at work ready to work, trained and so on. And this contribution is neglected in theorizing about the domestic sphere and about life and the relationship of capital, because the factory is favored. When you get to work, is the factory or the office is the focus of analysis. But there's the work of how does a factory worker get to the factory that's been neglected, and the work of women in getting the workers there from birth till end of training is unpaid. I mean, all right, some capitalists will say, oh no, we give the male the wage, but the male has to run the family, has to like give some of the money out of the wage to the wife, who then goes shopping with it. That's problematic in itself, because that's obviously a recipe for what? A power game. I've got the money, I've got hold of the wallet. And of course, yeah, the occasional instance where man comes home with the pay packet and just hands the whole thing over to the wife, but they wanted to say maybe I'm a little unclear actually whether they really wanted wages for housework, or they were just using this idea as a provocation to make people think differently about this situation, because people had not been thinking, and do not often think, about the way in which the family and the women in the family especially are doing unpaid, unrecognized work in reproducing a labor force for capital. Now, more and more of this is recognized. Think about what's been happening with education. In the education sector, we see that there's a thing called socialization, right? That the cost, in some societies this is a good thing, in some societies this is a bad thing. Where the universities are sometimes for profit, right? Not building the society, but actually in the business of selling education, it's a really problematic issue that, like in Australia and in England, in Australia especially, I was there when this happened in the 80s, they started to talk about user pays. That's a kind of version of socialization, but a real commercial version. User pays, and the argument of that was, well, students, they've had a free ride for too long. They come to university, they don't pay any fees. The government pays for them to come to university. And these ratbag students, and they go off and get involved in, anti-Vietnam War protests and I don't know, rock music and terrible things. Why should the government pay for that? Because they're the ones going to benefit from their education. They're not going to be the working class. They're going to be middle class, whatever, because they've got a university education. They're going to benefit from it. They're going to get higher salaries, so they should pay. Right? User pays. The user of the education should pay. Although they didn't think this through, obviously, the government, because the actual people who benefit from someone who's been trained to a higher level at university is whoever hires the skilled worker for their company, right? You hire a highly skilled worker who's been trained by the government or at their own expense, and you're a company, you've got more opportunity to profit from hiring that worker. A lawyer, for example. Sure, a lawyer can charge, I don't know, $300 per hour or something. I'm sure it's probably much more than that. And maybe 100 of that goes to them, but 200 goes to the legal company that employs the lawyer, right? So if you go on who benefits from education should pay for it, it should be the capitalist. Of course, who pays for any kind of training, right? Should the person who receives the training pay for it? In families, the children don't pay their parents. We pay them back later on because we look after them when they get old and senile, when they start. Maybe, of course, in the West that happens less and less, and parents get the sooner we can get them off into the old age people's home, the better, where they'll die from COVID and so on first. Being cynical there, but there's no payback, but there is the expectation that you'll then pass on the training of the next generation of workers yourself. You'll do that selfless activity of parenting. Fair enough. So that's why I think that maybe the wages for housework thing was just a tool for making people think differently about the domestic space. The same with 24-hour childcare. There was an argument. They said, well, women need 24-hour childcare. And people went, what? Why? What are they going to do? Why don't they want to look after their babies at night? Well, why can't hubby look after the baby at night while the women go out to drink at the bar? Husband can go out to drink at the bar anytime he likes. So he goes off with his mates and sits at the bar complaining about how she doesn't understand me at home, drink, or whatever. And women were saying, well, we should be free to go out at any time as well, or go to night classes or work at night and have access to 24-hour childcare would allow that. I mean, this is a point at which they were calling for this when they didn't even have all-day childcare, not economically. It was crazy. Of course, these things are a bit different in a society like Vietnam, where you have grandparents staying in the extended home quite often. You've got 24-hour childcare. Not for grandparents, though, although the pandemic certainly showed the importance of this for some families, that the grandparents couldn't turn up and things got a bit stressful. I think there should be studies done of what this pandemic has done to issues like this. But 24-hour childcare or wages for housework was a provocative way of making people think differently about what is happening in a family, in a capitalist society, a mode of production of capitalism, which is what was the point. I mean, some Marxist theorists were upset with this stuff. David Harvey, for example, he says, you don't want to argue for wages for housework. That's just monetizing more and more parts of human life. And while that's true, I think he misses the point. You missed the point, David. The point isn't that wives should be paid. It's that they're in a relationship where they're being doing this extra work, and it's almost like well, it really is like unpaid labor. And so that's the point that was being made. It's unpaid labor, but it's essential labor for the capitalist process. You need this labor so that you've got future workers. And women who were workers as well, who worked in a factory or had some job in the home as well, have a double shift. They were like, things didn't change because women went out into the workforce. They didn't change, they changed, but not so much better. They worked in the workforce and then they came home and had to do childcare. It's like whereas husband came home and said, where's my dinner? And put your feet up in front of the television and watch football. I don't know what, that's not universal, but I'm thinking about the classic English TV sitcom version of the family that I know about. Of course, it varies differently, and I'm here to tell you, you can look after the kids and watch football at the same time. You just have to get the kids to be fans of football, as I've managed at least with my daughter, if not my son. He's not into football. But anyway, yeah, Federici and others, and now Camille Barbagallo, and next week, or at the conference on 17th, 18th, you can hear Li Huang Min Nguyen, Sally, talk about this stuff, and especially talk about Marx's text and women. Be very interesting, and I think to be encouraged. The thing about the domestic space, though, is there is, Harvey's right in some ways to point to the monetization of life in the family, because that really has been happening. More and more of our intimate daily life has been turned into a financial transaction. And I don't just mean the oldest profession, sexual services for cash. It's every part of domestic life. I don't know, my groceries are now delivered to my door by a service. I don't even, I do sometimes still go to Lottie Mart to shop in person, but can also get them delivered. Certainly the pandemic moved that along more, but more and more parts of everyday life are business opportunities. There are companies that see provision of these services as a growth area, right? Even if I do go to the supermarket, some of the labor that I would normally have done in the home is now done, and I pay for that. My carrots are already cut up. My cheese is already grated or cut into slices. I mean, it doesn't have to be like that, but because the kids want that kind of cheese and it's already grated, or my pizza is already made. My ready meal is already done. My meat is already cut up into bite-sized chunks. My peanuts are already shelled. I don't eat peanuts. What are they called? Almonds. My almonds are already shelled. When I was a kid, we had to crack the almond with a hammer and a cracker. Now they come already just ready to eat. Just pick them out of the plastic or glass bag. Your carrots, or you go to a cafe. Your food is, you have breakfast at a cafe. You used to have to make your own breakfast. Now it's just quickly prepare. You pour the cornflakes in a bowl, or you go to the cafe. Or your washing is done at in the washing machine, but now we can take it to a laundromat, drop it off, and have someone do it for money. Now, in some cultures, that's been around for ages and ages, but the automated laundry is a newish thing for the West. All cleaning is done by a maid, of course, and so is, as the film shows, so is sex work. Husbands are often serviced by people of color and people of a different class. Childcare can be done by a maid, of course. Although, it was interesting that in England, when I was a young lecturer many, many years ago, and had my kids at first, it was definitely okay for me to put the kid in childcare while I was teaching. But then if people heard that I'd hired someone at the same pay to clean my house, they thought that was really wrong, that I should do that myself. Whereas the childcare, which I would have thought that was more important because that's quality life. Whereas housework, I really don't care much about the quality of housework. I mean, I want things to be clean, but I don't enjoy doing it and it's not fun. Whereas childcare, looking after the kids, is fun. Why was it okay to monetize one and not the other? The other was seen as a little bit too bourgeois, having a cleaner, or having a cook would be even worse. I never did have a cook, but Now it's different in other societies and so on, but in England, it's weird how some things can be monetized and some are not. Haircuts, for example. All right, obviously, who cuts your hair, John? Well, I do. Shave it off, and I've hardly got any hair left. My son got his hair cut the other day, and was not impressed with my job of cutting his hair. He wanted to go to a hairdresser to get it done properly. Although, put some gel in it, it looks really good. So it wasn't an issue. But so many other parts of our life are becoming more and more monetized. And now you can, not only are your clothes made by a company, but now you can hire a company to decide amongst all the different clothes, which ones would most suit your personality. Your tailoring, your wardrobe consultant. That's not just for movie stars, that's for everyone. They can do it online. There are these companies. You can even hire your friends online. And I don't mean friends like in Facebook. You can hire someone that will pay their all their attention to you. And this started in Japan. You can hire an online friend because people are a bit, what do they call it? Hikikomori. They become digital isolates. They don't come out of their room ever. Perfect training for a pandemic. So this monetization of more and more of life, is quite incredible. And actually, since the 2000s, at least, this is really transformed because of digitization, shopping online and education online. Think of online classes that are going on right now, just 2 rooms down here. My son is still doing his Tingviet test online and so on. All organized by the magic maestros out at Palo Alto in Silicon Valley in the West Coast in America, where they invent all this stuff, the new computer gadgetry. I mean, not just there, but I see the TV series Halt and Catch Fire, which is a fantastic 4-part series. I think it shows a lot of these processes intimately, although it's not as critical as it could be, because the implications are much more profound. This is where Bernard Stiegler's work is interesting, because there are a lot of anthropologists looking at this stuff seem to panic a bit about, the technology is getting into their lives, and I think that's a little bit rich, because a book is also technology, a pencil, a pen, these are all technologies as well. But sure, a focus on the screen and everyone in the position, the same position all over the world is problematic, but not reason to panic. Camille Barbagello, who I got you to write, she's written about digital parenting. There are apps on your phone that have monetized because they're for ads, and you look at them and that gets them advertising revenue, to organize even broken families, how families will sort out childcare between them when they're co-parenting across distance. In fact, my kids talk to their mum every day for half an hour just before bed via WhatsApp, right? These branded apps allow parents to keep in touch across massive distances or to track their child's progress in the training, the reproduction of their capacity as a future labourer, right? We got an electronic message just yesterday about how Theodore had done well in English. Of course he does, and he passed his Tingviet, and we're all celebrating digitally across, with family in Australia, family in England, and family here, because of this new technology. And of course, there's somebody making a cut out of this, because, well, our family relations, even our conversations are measured to the second now and monetized. Right? Your education is monetized. You're paying by the hour. I know, and I'm waffling on about it, wasting your education, your precious education with chit chat about I don't know what I saw on TV the other week. But yeah, the fun part of our domestic life is monetized now. We don't sit around playing board games about Monopoly. we tune into the monopoly television company called Netflix, or whatever it is that you tune into. This is how the entertainment industry has found its way into family domestic life and monetized even entertainment. Not to mention, yet haven't even got into Roblox and Minecraft and those, what's your game, your favorite game, Annabelle? Come and tell people about it. What's your favorite game on the computer?
Roblox.
Roblox?
Yeah.
What's the other one with the little houses?
Oh, Minecraft.
Minecraft.
I kind of like it, but no, not really, because still I like the animals, all that.
You like the animals?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can kill them for food. But
You can kill them for food?
only pig and horse and sheep.
Okay.
And
But you can't eat them, can you?
yeah, we can. They give you food just for survival and
For survival. You're learning survival, are you? Wow.
I think
Online learning of survival. Goodbye. Okay. So, right. Even
Roblox is mermaid, has mermaid game. I love Roblox.
And Roblox has a mermaid game. Okay. Thank you
And
very
you can
much.
be mermaid.
You've had your moment in the of stardom. Thank you. Back to your storytelling. Okay, so the kids are also having their minds reformatted by this stuff. And of course, the Robux company, its valuation on the stock market right now is huge because it's caught them when they're young. It's taken the place of parents in some respects, right? I sometimes can't get their attention because they're so obsessed with this game, unless there's something that extra that they want me to buy, which I mostly 98% of the time say no to, because like it's money that can't be spent. And here you go. Now that we mentioned it, she wants it back because she hasn't actually had it. Go on. Because I restrict the amount of time. Simply because they can entertain themselves and read. Because books are also a technical device. Anyway, this is our environment world, and let alone this, right? This labor of women doing this, supporting this, despite a few other examples, you'll find that most of the labor here can be thought about in part of this grammar of reproduction as immaterial labor. It doesn't actually produce any object, any product, although it produces a product, something for sale, but it's immaterial, right? So it's service economy. It produces feelings, it produces ideas, it produces desires, and it sells them. Think about the role of women in this, though, as really crucial. More often, this labor of emotional labor or immaterial labor is done by women. A classic example that's been around for ages is in the restaurant industry. So in the restaurant industry, they're selling food. But food is food, right? You can have special dishes and so on. But really, a successful restaurant is one where the staff have a thing going on. Their customer service gets you to come back, and that's usually women, younger women, who are a bit flirty with the male customers, or they might. But without smiles, a worker in a restaurant won't get tips in America, for example. There's a tipping culture, so unlike here. I mean, that's a good thing about here, that there's not that kind of, but there is a little bit. Think of the selling at barbecue places where they've got to sell beer. There are particular people enticing you to have another beer, right? By having a little chat. And how bored they look if you catch them, that they have to talk to you. But anyway. Or think about just the labor that women do, just keeping the relationship going of the family. keeping everyone in the family, not tearing each other's hair apart, keeping the kids from fighting each other, and keeping the husband satisfied in various ways. And the picture I've got here is Wonder Woman listening to Batman talk about his relationship problems. Right? The labor that women have to do for even gay men is Batman gay? I think he is, right? Robin, him, more than just good friends. Anyway, Batman's always angsting about he's lost his parents when they were young, and poor Wonder Woman has to listen to him talk about that all the time, and say, yes, don't worry, Batman, they're there. You'll save Gotham. It'll be okay. You don't need to wear a mask around your eyes. Put it over your mouth and shut up. Anyway, the role of women in all this labor is something to be celebrated, I suppose, as well as critiqued. They keep community going, and if without women doing that kind of labor in most political groups, those political groups wouldn't survive. They do the organizational stuff that keeps the organization going. And I don't know whether I mentioned it, the removal of that work, that labor by women, can be a sensational thing. And Camille Barbagallo is a force behind this women's strike as well. Not the only one, but she's certainly got a lot of energy for it. And it's significant, because when that labor's not there, you get to thinking. And you know, that organizational work of reproducing even progressive organizations isn't going to be replaced by the men who, on those days of the women's strike, pretend to be caring and bake cookies and look after the kids for that one day a year. Actually, I don't have that much to say about this image. It's a little bit too contradictory for me. It's I probably shouldn't have used it. It's got problematic. What's your tattoo? And he's made some cookies. Woohoo! And he's got a matching. He's naked. Oh, anyway, all right. I'm stopping this. You know the point. It's also traumatic to even think of who does the labor and what the solutions are to this, because it ain't him either. So